Hello and welcome to another episode of Film Freakz with a Z, the podcast all about movies. Each episode is about a single movie, and of course we'll introduce this episode's movie in a little bit. But we're always taking recommendations for your fan vote. That's right. You can send them either in the comment section of the latest YouTube version of Film Freakz, or you can send us an email at ff.filmfreakswithaz@gmail.com. Or you can talk in the movies section of my Discord, the Ferret Nation Discord, to also recommend a movie if you so desire. And of course, this is a special episode, so let's introduce ourselves before we get started. I am YemmytheFerret. Who am I here with?
Pretty awful.
Hey, Mason.
And as per usual, when we have a guest on the podcast, we're down one man. So in spirit, Coco Gamer is here with us. But we have a special guest today to fill that slot, as I said. He's the man of many Fallout and Skyrim streams. It's Maztech Gaming, a.k.a. Maz. How you doing today?
What's up, Yemmy? Thanks for having me on. Thank you very much, Tay. Appreciate having you having me, Greedy Waffles.
No problem. Thank you for the movie recommendation.
Good to have you. And yeah, thanks for that. Finally getting to it. Like I said, I've been wanting it for a while.
Maz was one of the OGs for the film recommendation. Actually, I think it was the first one that we had.
Yeah.
And
you guys have been doing this a year now, right?
Well, yeah, it's almost taken 50 episodes for it to be chosen. So
I'm just glad
Transformers, right?
Yeah, so I'm just glad it's this, not Transformers.
Well, that dark day will come. But right now, we're going to talk about a different movie. Maz, why don't you introduce it for us?
We're going to be talking about Goodfellas, which is a classic, in my opinion, and actually most critically acclaimed, is probably one of the best gangster movies ever. It was released in 1990. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. 5 really major actors of note were in this, which is a very star-studded cast. You have Ray Liotta as Henry Hill. You have Joe Pesci, who is Tommy DeVito in that. Robert De Niro shows up as Jimmy Conway. Paul Sorvino's in it as Paul Cicero. And then you've got Lorraine Bracco, who plays Karen Hill as well in the movie. It was actually inspired by a book called Wise Guy that was actually dictated by Henry Hill himself back in 1985 and written by Nicholas Pileggi. I hope that's informative enough.
Very informative.
Perfect.
Yeah, good job.
Fantastic.
Maz, I think we all know that you are a huge fan of this movie, so where do you want to start this conversation at?
God. We can start at the beginning. We can talk about the timeline follows Henry Hill's rise and fall from 1955 all the way to 1980. It's based on a true story. Some of the characters have different names. And as we go through the movie, I'll tell you a couple different instances in different scenes that were kind of altered to make it a little bit more movie friendly. Like for instance, just to give you a quick little idea, the Lufthansa heist that they talk about for like 7 minutes in the entire movie, that could have been an entire movie of its own, because it was a 90-minute heist, and it took them almost a year to put together and make sure it went off seamlessly. So lots of really cool scenes in this movie. We can start right at the beginning if you guys want to, though.
Yeah, how do you feel about it starting kind of, you don't know it at the time, but kind of like in a midway point for the timeline?
It's kind of a little bit of a teaser there. I love the beginning, because that's such a violent scene that it really kind of gets you gripped, right? Because if you're starting out at the beginning and you've got a 12-year-old boy, he's like 17 in the movie, but in real life he was actually 12, 13 years old when he started working with the Vario family, or the Cicero family in this case, for the Lucchese crime family. So really starting out like that and a little bit slow. I think it's a nice little teaser to find out what happens with Henry Hill kind of being put in that position where he's with 2 psychotic killers that have taken out a made man. So I thought it was a pretty good start to the movie. Definitely, that gets your attention pretty quick, because that's all within the first 45 seconds. So
Yeah, when they say they got a flat, I'm like, hold on. They ain't bumping around here.
nope, absolutely not. And it's pretty intense scene.
Definitely. I agree. That's definitely the best place to start. Just because, because if we just started with him as a kid, you'd just be going, okay, I guess, gangsters. But what can I expect from this? Well, this beginning makes you go, okay, I know what to expect from this movie.
Yeah, usually I'm not a fan of the movies that start jump around like that, but no, it does fit this movie very well, and it does draw attention to the viewers. So I think I don't mind it in this one. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing the story lead up to that moment, and I'm in the same boat. I don't usually like that stuff, but I can give this movie a pass because it does start the movie off with like a bang, and you understand the tone almost immediately as the movie starts.
Right, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic attention grabber. But when we're talking about continuity between the book and the movie, actually, they stabbed him with that kitchen knife, that butcher's knife, and they shot him. They actually never really shot him. They actually dragged him out of the trunk and beat him to death with a tire iron, which I think would have probably dissolved their R rating. So
yeah.
And it would have taken too long. It's quicker. Just quickly stab him, shoot him. You're done.
Absolutely, point made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's funny that they bury the body there, and then the Robert De Niro's character James, he's like, well, they're building condos there now, so we got to move the body.
Yeah, gotta go back. Wait, shit, we fucked up. It's like, go back.
Moment.
Yep, and Henry Hill's reaction during that scene is hilarious. Well, Tommy and Jimmy are just egging him on, getting him to puke more.
Well, it's crazy how they were just so nonchalantly just digging up that grave and moving the body, and it seemed like Henry still had a little bit of humanity left in him at that moment.
So Henry was actually he was an associate, and because he was half Irish, half Italian, he was never able to be made into the Lucchese family officially. But he was really kind of a money runner. He was the one that was kind of scheming and making a quick buck for the family. But he was asked to whack somebody once, as you saw in the movie. We'll talk about that later. But he never killed anybody. So when he saw the violence around him, it actually, quite honestly, tore him up. It terrified him. He always thought that when he was on the street that this was maybe his last day on earth, because these people that he hung out with were literally psychotic. They could be smiling in your face, shaking your hand, giving you a hug, and putting a knife in your back at the same time. So he lived in fear.
Yeah, I think Ray Liotta did a good job of expressing that. Like, you could see in his face where he's just like, "Okay, I'm here. It's not what I do."
Completely agree. Completely agree.
Well, my favorite scene, well, not my favorite scene, but a good scene was when they were playing poker, and the waiter was like done with the guy's shit, and he's just like, what, fuck off. He's just like, you knew that moment, you're like, oh, he's dead. He's a dead motherfucker.
Go fuck yourself, Tommy.
Yeah. And you knew. And then they were like, it was a good lead up to it, and everyone around them was like joking, oh no, yeah, he got you, the guy got balls, and then all of a sudden he's like, bam.
Yeah, and it goes to illustrate how psychotic Tommy was in real life. And the funny thing about that is, Joe Pesci, fantastic actor. He actually won an Oscar for Goodfellas, but he's 5'4", and the real Tommy was over 6'3" and over 300 pounds. So it was kind of funny that they made him.
Joe Pesci does psychotic to a T.
He really does. So, and that's perfect. And just a sidebar, you guys recognize who Spider was in that scene?
He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him.
It was Michael Imperioli. He played Christopher Moltisanti in The Sopranos.
Okay, I didn't see The Sopranos.
Oh, another fantastic one. Another story for another time, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think going back to what we were saying about Henry kind of being the outcast, do you think that's why he turned to drugs eventually in the movie, because he felt so I don't know, maybe anxious about everything that was happening around him with all the killing.
That could have something to do with it. It could also be, the fact that when they got imprisoned for that altercation in Tampa, he had to turn to drugs, because when you are in a crime family, everything gets put on hold. You are an outcast. You're a nobody. You don't exist, because being involved, you don't get even, they don't even visit you.
Mm-hmm.
Being involved in family affairs when you are in jail implicates other crime family members. So that was the only way that he could continue to make some sort of income, because there's no kickbacks. You're not getting a kick on your jobs on the street. You're not earning. So I think that he eventually started using it, getting high on his own supply, so to speak. And what happened at that point was, I think that he just kind of went into that downward spiral. It kind of took the edge off for him, but it also made him very paranoid, as you can see.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the drugs, like, in the earlier, like, crime families, that wasn't really how they did things. Like, I'm sure the drugs existed, but they weren't maybe as easily accessible. And then obviously that kind of changed in the 80s, because everyone was doing crack.
Exactly.
And, he saw this as a way to make an easy buck, which, Paulie was like, hey, don't deal in drugs, because that's not how we do things, and we can easily get pinched for that.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do it. And he was like, but it's an easy buck. It's out of his way. I'll do it anyways. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And ironically, that is how they got,
Yeah.
pinched
That
in
is
the
how
end.
they got him.
Absolutely.
So, I'm jumping all over here. So, when they go to Tommy goes to get made, into whatever crime family, like, how did they find out for sure, or how'd they find it? They don't. Not that I know. They didn't explain how they found out he actually was the one who killed the other guy from, like, the other crime family.
Okay, so that's Billy Batts was the one from the Gambino family, and the Gambino family at that point was headed by John Gotti, as you guys can remember, or maybe remember, maybe not. But he was a very, very notorious family crime boss back in the 70s and 80s. He kind of rose to power. He was a foot soldier and kind of overthrew the family and became the boss. So the Gambino family put a lot of pressure on the Lucchese family, specifically Paulie. They had an idea that he had whacked Billy Batts. And one other gangster, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, off the top of my head. So when you have that when you kill a made man, you're marked. Whether you are made or not, you don't fuck with made men.
Yeah,
you have to have a sit down. Yeah, you have to have a sit down with the 5 families. So once that happens, though, that family is going to start putting pressure and asking a lot of questions. Now, the thing is, when I read the book, it's called The Lufthansa Heist. It's the follow-up book to Wise Guy. And what I was reading in that is that they had put a lot of pressure on Paulie. And then finally, he just kind of gave in and said, I think that it was him. And in the movie, when he's talking, after Henry gets out of jail, he kind of asks about Billy Batts. He's like, you know anything about that?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, I have no idea. So he already knew that they knew something about it. Because if you look at the way Paulie looks at Henry when he says, do you know anything about that? He's like, oh, no, I have no idea. They kind of knew already. So at that point, he really needed to give him up in order to get the pressure off his family. And the book suggests that John Gotti himself actually shot him
Really?
killed Tommy. Yeah. And the thing is, the book didn't come out until after Henry Hill was dead, which is pretty funny, because so that means they kind of sat on that Lufthansa Heist book until he had died, because I think that would have caused a lot of disturbance in the families. I mean, John Gotti's dead as well, but I think that really would have caused some problems with the families if they just kind of threw that out and said, yeah, John Gotti was the one that killed him. But yeah, it does sound like he was whacked because of that, but they kind of just gave him up because he was a loose cannon, for one, and two, he couldn't be trusted anymore. He was kind of doing his own thing. So
Agreed.
Yeah,
It
was a pretty surprising scene to me. Like, I knew something was going to come of that because they made such a big point to, stay on it for a while in the movie. But when he was getting made, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and then all of a sudden he gets sniped in the back. Well, not sniped, but he gets shot in the back of the head, and I was actually pretty stunned at that moment. I couldn't believe what I just saw.
Yeah, it's out of nowhere because they write it out in the movie that that we know it's a problem. It's been brought up, but then they don't really talk about it again for probably a good 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. Plus, he's sitting there with his mother beforehand. He's kissing her on the cheek, and you think that everything's going to be good for him, and then boop. And he also thought. I mean, he was completely blindsided.
Oh yeah, he thought he was good.
Until he opened the door and realized no one was there, and he went, ah.
Yep, he knew he was screwed the second he opened that door. Absolutely.
It was great. I was watching the movie with my wife, and she had never seen it before. I saw it, back in film school. But she, I asked her in the middle, so what do you think is going to happen? She's like, well, all I hope is that Tommy dies.
She got her wish.
She did. And then the second he got killed, she went, oh, good.
Yeah, Joe Pesci played that character so well. Like you were saying earlier, he plays Psycho to a T.
Yeah.
You love to hate the guy. I mean, the shit that he pulls in that, that funny how, that whole scene, which is improvised, by the way, that just really makes you see how creeped out he is. I mean, if you look at Henry, he's legitimately scared.
He looks
even though he's fucking with him. Yeah,
not comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's great. He does a great job with it.
He does.
Yeah, that scene in general is one that I knew about, but didn't know the context because, back in high school, I'd watch Mojo, and they'd be like the top 10 improvised performances, and this one would always be in like the top 1 or 2, depending on how they felt that day. And I'm glad I finally got to see the context for the entire scene and actually watched it in its entirety without someone talking over it. Mm-hmm. And it's a really gripping scene, and you actually feel like anxious while watching it because you're like, oh shit, is Henry about to just get blasted right now or something?
Yeah, you actually feel uncomfortable, and even when he pulls the gun out, he's like, Tommy, calm down. It's like that's how loose this guy was. He was so crazy.
Yeah, how more people didn't get shot with how many guns were just kind of pointed around at everyone is beyond me. But
right, well, the first kill that Tommy ever did was a random guy. They were walking down the street, Tommy and Henry, and he just randomly said, and this is in the Wise Guy book, he just randomly says, hey, Henry, check this out. Turns around, shoots the guy in the face. And that was his first kill. I mean, that's how
old
insane this guy was.
When that happened.
So I can't remember. I know that Henry got into the family when he was 12, and I think that Tommy came in like a year later, so that would make him 11. He was 2 years younger than Henry. So probably my guess would be 12, 13 was when he committed his first murder.
Oh, wow.
Wow, jeez, young.
Yeah. They are much younger than they are portrayed in the movie in the beginning scenes.
Which makes a lot more sense, because I was just kind of looking at the timeline, I'm like, when they're like, oh, he's 21, I'm like, he looks 31.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it was actually they were probably about 4 or 5 years younger than they were actually portrayed in the movie.
Yeah. Well, just Ray Liotta trying to play a 21-year-old and Robert De Niro playing like a 25-year-old, 30-year-old, and you're like, I mean, movies do that all the time where you're just like, these kids are supposed to be high school, they're like 30.
Right, exactly. And that kind of makes it a little bit unrealistic, but they do such a good job. I mean, if you think about it, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't think of a better actor for each one of those roles for this movie, specifically.
Acting was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They did a good job of de-aging De Niro, especially for the time when this movie came out in the 90s. There was no effects you could put on their face or anything like that.
Yeah, it was just makeup.
Yeah, they actually did a pretty good job with that. Even though you could still tell he was older, it definitely looked pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's not like what's that newer movie that came out, The Irishman. It's not like The Irishman where they actually had CG work done on their faces and stuff like that. Where
it still didn't work.
Yeah, it still didn't look amazing. This movie makes it look a lot better, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, he still didn't look 25, but he did look.
But, yeah.
I mean, the way you see him at the end of the movie when he's trying to egg Karen on into the shop. It's like that's Robert De Niro at that time without makeup.
Yeah.
Like they didn't
Yes.
age him up or anything. That's just how he looked.
Exactly.
And I love it when they actually gave him glasses and stuff. I'm like, oh, that makes him look so much better.
Oh, definitely. They did such a wonderful job with all of it. It was just, to me, it was a perfect movie. It's my favorite movie of all time. I had to have watched it thousands of times. And I actually didn't even watch it before we had a chance to talk. I didn't get a chance to, but I mean, I've watched it literally probably over 1,000 times. So
what connects you to this movie so much?
You know, it's funny. There is.
This is where
I've
Maz
always
tells us
been.
that he's a made man, and
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
gonna say, well, I'm part
Yeah.
of a crime family.
Well, I'm Irish Italian, so I can't be made. but I will share that the person in the connection in Philly is one of my cousins,
Wow.
and that's not why I got interested in it. Well, he was one of my cousins, but I've always been drawn to the organized crime, not as in like I want to be in it, but just how they operate. They do so many different things that they get away with. I mean, you look at Al Capone, and look what he ran. He ran whores, speakeasy, bootlegging, smuggling, whatever, and they got him on tax evasion. That's it. You know, how does that work? How do you do that? How do you work all that stuff? And we're talking on a national scale in some cases, especially in the 20s, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that and get away with it? Not that I'm trying to learn anything like that, but it's more like just learning the psychology. Yeah, right? Yeah. Is there something you want to tell me? No, but it's more of, you know, what are the moving parts? How does that work? It's always been fascinating to me. And to have a counter organized crime wing or division in the FBI that was specifically built up to stop organized crime, and organized crime is not nearly what it used to be, of course, as a result, right? But I just find it fascinating, to be honest with you. I've always have. It's kind of like, how, why? And when I was a kid, you know, when you are in La Cosa Nostra, which is this thing of ours, which because they never mention the mafia, we're not in the mob, we're not gangsters or anything like that. It's just our thing, right? That's what La Cosa Nostra means. It means our thing. And you don't talk about it. You don't go and grandstand that you're a gangster in the mafia or anything like that. But John Gotti they called him the Teflon Don, and he wore the high profile $3,000 suits. And we're talking like in the 80s. $3,000 is a lot of money in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On you know, always, you know, on in the media, always kind of grandstanding. And they had people outside of his trials. Because I think they tried to get maybe like 6 or 7 times before they finally got him. They had people outside rooting for him. He was a celebrity.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets your attention as a kid too. You're like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. I mean, of course, it wasn't cool, but you know, you're a kid, and it's like, all right, yeah, whatever. But yeah, and then it's funny to find out that one of my cousins was involved in the whole the drug thing back then, and more prolifically and they don't talk about it too much in this movie either. The Boston College points shaving scandal, which is ultimately how they got one of the 2 ways they got Jimmy Burke or Jimmy Conway put away until he was supposed to get out in 2004, I believe. He died in prison though.
That was one thing my wife commented on when it came to like he was supposed to get bail in 2004. She's like, it's like that's past now, did he?
No, he died in prison. I think he died in, I want to say like 2001, 2002. So
Gotcha.
almost made it.
Yeah.
Almost close.
Almost made it.
You know, the one thing that I was really hoping to see in this movie was more like food, because you know, in a lot of these mobster movies, like everything is done over dinner or something like that. And even though they had those great scenes with the good-looking food in there, I kind of was hoping for like more of that kind of thing, you know, because that's a big thing in a lot of these mobster movies, you know.
Are you talking about shop talk over dinner?
Well, yeah, they
Like,
always do conduct their business over like a plate of pasta or those
right.
grilling sausage on the grill in the back.
Right. So Paul Vario was a very, very quiet capo, Paul Cicero. I'm sorry. Real name, Paul Vario. He's Cicero in the movie. He was very, very secretive and very quiet because he didn't trust anybody. He was probably one of the quietest but most ruthless and most psychotic gangsters or capos in the Lucchese family. Actually, if you read some articles, I've watched documentaries on like what really happened in the Lucchese family, and there were some people that are part of the family that said that as great of an actor as Paul Sorvino is, he didn't scratch the surface of how bad this guy was. I mean, this guy was a fucking lunatic. There was one, and this is in the Lufthansa heist as well, when Henry was a kid, when he first got into the family, I guess one of his Gumars, which is his girlfriend, and this is one of Paulie's Gumars, kind of stepped out of line and started talking about their relationship. Well, he walked into a diner and took a baseball bat to her back and beat the crap out of her. And Henry, 12 years old, 13 years old, sitting in the car watching this happen. So, I mean, that's how crazy he was. You do that, first of all, you should never do that, but to do that in front of a kid on top of it, all that, that's kind of insane. So how do you really portray that type of ruthlessness? And you only have a couple of 3 hours to put a movie together too, for the most part, right?
Yeah. He definitely came off, as quiet, doesn't really talk. I mean, they mentioned in the movie how he doesn't talk to anybody. There's only like 6 people who talk to him. He doesn't use a phone, and you have to go to like someone else's house to get their phone and then use a payphone, which if Henry had used that method, he would never have gotten caught.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So to circle back to your question there, Yemmy, you don't see that much in the movie because it simply never really happened in real life.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just a stereotype.
Mm-hmm. Sopranos, all the food you can eat while you're watching them wheel and deal. It's usually sandwiches, though.
Yeah, like in this, they were usually at the bar, occasionally at the restaurant, but
usually in the backyard, usually on the corner of a street, just and never really in person. I mean, even when he goes to Paulie and say, "Hey, you know what? I fucked up. I'm broke. I got busted." He only said 3 sentences to Henry the entire time.
Right. You kind of
He's
forget
like,
that he's like the big head because you don't see him often enough in the movie,
Mm-hmm. And that's how he was in real life. He
Right.
stayed out of the spotlight. He was the polar opposite of John Gotti. He didn't want you to know him. He didn't want you to see him. He didn't want you to hear him. He kept to himself.
So I'm gonna say something a little critical about the movie here. So don't pop a gasket on me. But there's one editing choice that I was a little confused about, and I don't know if you guys would agree. But they had a few freeze frames in the movie. And I was wondering if it was me in just streaming the movie in general, but there's a couple of freeze frames where they stop and do like voiceover narration, and I didn't quite understand why they would stop the footage at a few key moments. There's other times where they keep the voiceover going and the track in the background is also the movie's still going. I don't know. I felt like the freeze frames were a little out of place.
I didn't notice any freeze frames.
Yeah, I didn't notice either.
So maybe it was my streaming service.
Nope. It's 2 freeze frames.
Okay.
It's one when the car blows up in the beginning, and the other, is like one time, it's and the other one is when Jimmy asks Henry to go whack somebody for him, and that's when he's like, it was at that point that I knew I was going to get whacked.
Yeah,
because he had never asked anybody. He had never been asked. Well, Jimmy never asked him to kill anybody. I think they put that in there just for a little bit of a dramatic effect, like that whole thing. That whole one time, the kids from my I can't remember exactly how it was. My mother's groceries back to the house out of respect. I think that's because that's such a long sentence to say in that short period of time. I think they just kind of extended it by freezing, but I kind of agree with you on that, Yemmy. I don't see the point of that. I think the freeze frame, though, when Jimmy asks Henry to whack somebody, when he said, oh, this is how I knew, this is how it happens. I knew that I was a dead man at that point. I think they freeze framed that with that look on Ray Liotta's face and on Jimmy's face, just to say, just so you can get a good look at his face. You can tell
shit just got real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that one makes sense. The car explosion, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you overall.
Oh, man, you cut out at the end there.
Oh, I agree with you overall on that one. As far as the choice of cinematography there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I get you now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, overall, for the most part, the cinematography was great. I really enjoyed the presentation of the movie in general. It's just when they froze the frame, it was a little bit jarring to me because I'm just kind of going through the movie and I'm really immersed into it, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you're watching a movie, and I'm like, wait, what?
That's a good point.
Also, when his wife is pointing that gun at his face, and she's got it cocked back, so that means any slight finger movement would totally send that thing going off. I don't know if that's how it actually happened in real life, where she was pointing at him with the thing locked in place. But I feel like in most situations that gun would have gone off, and I was waiting for that. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Yeah, it was a very intense scene. I agree with you. I don't think that it would. I think she would have ended up killing him. But he liked to embellish a little bit too on some of the things.
Well, as you do.
And that actor was phenomenal. Karen, right? I mean, I know that's not her real name, but Karen in the movie.
Bracco. Yep.
Yeah, and she did a phenomenal job of playing like the psycho wife, I guess you could say.
She was. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I'm just surprised it took her, after all of that shit, she left him in 85 or something. I think it said at the end of the movie, where it's just like,
yeah, 25 years.
Yeah, I was like, took you long enough.
Oh yeah,
5 years to get divorced. Yeah,
and his daughters ultimately ended up hating him as well. I mean, he dragged her through the mud. I mean, is it really just his fault? No. I mean, come on. Second, he handed her a gun while they were dating. That's kind of like a "fuck this, I'm out" type situation. But she stuck with it, and the way that they live their lives with Gumars and when you are part of our thing, as they put it, that La Cosa Nostra, you put your family first. Even though he wasn't in the mafia, he was not part of that family. He was just an associate. You're expected to put that family before your own, and he kind of lived up to that for a while. Couldn't stay out of trouble even after he was in witness protection. Got kicked out of witness protection for drug use and selling and everything like that. And eventually, enough is enough, right? And I think that's ultimately what drove her away, was the fact that, okay, you didn't learn the first time. You had the government that gave you a complete bailout, saving your life, and then you go and pull this shit somewhere else. They moved multiple times because he couldn't stay quiet. I mean, at the end of his life, he was a regular guest from Seattle, Washington, on the Howard Stern show. I mean, come on, these people don't let this shit go. So at some point, you got to cut bait, right, and be like, okay, you know what, I'm out.
Well, it's good to hear that even the daughters despised him in the end.
Yeah.
Because, he wasn't a very good father.
No. I mean, he was spending most of his time, out all night and with the other woman, and they the main difference between a movie like this and how they portray, the life of these, pseudo mobsters is it's not glorified to the extent that it's like, oh, it's like everything's good and blah blah blah. Like, you watch a movie like Wolf of Wall Street, and yeah, sure, he goes through some shit, but in the end, everything's okay, and I'm here, and I'm giving speeches at the end of the movie, and they kind of glorified that person's life. Whereas with this movie, you definitely see the more nitty gritty. It's definitely not like, it's not like, hey, I would like to be in his shoes. It's more so like, hey, it's more grounded in reality, and it's showing you like how dirty these things actually get. So I really like that about this movie.
Yeah, you end up a schnook.
Yeah.
That's a good word. Word of the day, schnook.
But I know that was a thing that people were talking about with like Wolf of Wall Street and other movies of that same thing, is like, well, maybe we put a little bit too much light or a little bit too much fun into this one. And even though Wolf of Wall Street is still a good movie, it doesn't hold a candle to how this movie portrays its notorious, cast.
That was like another good movie that did that, like where it kind of looked like, oh, this is fun, until you at the end you go, oh, this was Requiem for a Dream.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's not like a great movie, but it's not bad. It's got Jared Leto. People are probably gonna be mad that I said it's not great, but but yeah, it's about drug use and everything, and by the end you just go like, yeah, drugs are. I don't want to do drugs, which this movie does that as well. At the end, where you're like, okay, at least need to stay away from cocaine.
There you go. Your next movie recommendation.
No, it's not. I got a movie already.
Oh, that's a first.
Yeah.
No. The last time I had a movie like the Edge of Tomorrow movie, I had planned out for like several weeks before.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing better, guys.
If you haven't checked out the movie, you definitely want to check it out. It is seriously it's my favorite movie. I don't think there's a better movie in the world out there. Of course, it's an opinion thing, but you look at all these different gangster movies. Even we're talking we're company with the Godfather, Godfather 2, Godfather 3. Yeah, I know.
This movie is so much better than Godfather 1 and 2.
Yeah, that was my question. It's like, this movie top those two? And it sounds like it is.
Yeah, this movie has to be like the best mobster movie out there.
I think it is.
It is critically acclaimed as that as well. I mean, it is like, you're not going to outdo this. I mean, The Irishman was very, very good. That was more of a movie geared towards Jimmy Hoffa, and that kind of based on the book, I Heard You Paint Houses. But that is really a far cry from what this was. This ended up being Martin Scorsese's opus. I think it made him. I mean, The Taxi Driver got him on the map, but this is what made him a legend, along with these other actors. And there's really, arguably, no better mob movie out there than this.
Agreed.
A+.
Yep.
Well, I guess do our thoughts and ratings.
Yeah, Maz, why don't you start us off with your final thoughts on the movie, and then we do a rating out of 5.
Okay. I think really for what happened during Henry Hill's life, from at least from 1955 to 1980, they did a really good job keeping it pretty linear as far as, aside from the age difference and whatnot. But a lot of those changes are done because of just because it's a little bit more convenient cinematically. But I think for the timeline that things happened, barring a couple things being changed with what happened with him, actually, like for instance, when he got pinched for selling cigarettes, he was actually got pinched doing a tire scam at an auto shop. That's not nearly as sexy as selling cigarettes illegally as a kid. Mm-hmm. But other than some of those, they did a really good job bringing him right up through his life, from his teenage years, getting started out, up to making a name in his early 20s, up to really hitting it hard with the Lufthansa heist and really making him a legend, all the way down to his downfall. I think they did a fantastic job with it. It's fantastically written. You're not going to find, like I said earlier in the conversation, you're not going to find a better actor for any one of these characters. They hit the nail on the head. This was 100% perfect. And based on my bias, of course, because I've always loved the movie since the day it came out. Of course, my mother didn't allow me to watch it until I was like 15. So it was like 5 years after it came out. I'm giving it a 5. And I don't usually give out 5s, 4.5 stars and whatnot. This is probably, if I ever come back on again, if maybe another 50 episodes when somebody votes for my movie, you'll probably never hear me say 5 again. This is all out on the table for me.
Yeah, I think we all saw that one coming. Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really enjoyable movie. There's, just a one or two editing choices that I would have been okay with them not doing a freeze frame on, but that's, very minor in the grand scheme of things. Wonderfully acted, beautiful cinematography, great pace to the movie as well. Like, it never really felt the runtime, in my opinion. It's a 2.5 hour movie, and I felt like it just kind of flew by because I was just so engaged and interested in the story. And yeah, I mean, I think I've said what I need to say, and I'm also going to give it a 5 out of 5.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying, but I did feel the runtime a little bit, but the movie was so interesting enough, and it always kept you on your toes. Scenes were intense, it was wonderfully acted, and it was cool to see, like, the rise and the downfall of Henry, and, all the other characters played a wonderful role, and even when, like, you did expect nothing to happen, something did happen, that scene where it gets sniped. Yeah, and I agree with you guys, and I'm also going to give it a 5.
Nice.
All right. Well, I'm going to disagree with you all and give it a 1. No, I'm joking.
Oh.
No, I'm joking. No, I agree with you guys. Cinematography was great. Acting was great. It was, just a really, really good movie. And there's a reason, like I said, the first time I saw it was in film, in film school, because it's part of history. And they're like, this is one you have to watch. And I went, okay, yeah, I agree. So I also give it a 5 out of 5.
All right.
Oh, wow.
So
Let me ask you guys this real quick.
One thing before you do that, Maz, I just got to say, Coco did not give me his review or rating, so we'll have to ask him about that next time.
Okay.
It's probably like a 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 5 or something.
Oh,
Maz, the only reason we say that is because we all rated a movie like 4.5, and then Coco was like the odd one out with like a 1.5, and that became a little bit of a meme on the podcast.
nice. When was the last time you guys did a perfect 5 across the board, though?
It was one of my movies, I think.
It was,
or no.
October
I think
Sky.
it was October Sky, yeah.
Yeah, I think October Sky, for sure. I thought there was one after that, but I don't remember now.
Anyway, what were you going to say, Maz? I apologize.
That was the question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the only. I think that's the only one that we've been 5 out of 5s across the board.
No, I thought there was one other. Or maybe it was like 3 5s and a 4.5 or something. It was close.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, someone could go back and probably listen to these all, and they'll be like commenting below, like, you guys are forgetting this movie. Sorry, not to make you guys sound like you listeners to sound like.
Callus will be the one to do it.
Right.
Get on it, Callus.
Callus, I love you. Do it.
All right. Well, hey, it's time for me to do a movie recommendation, and I got 2 guilty pleasure movies here for me. And I was having trouble deciding between the 2. So
just do the head flip again, huh?
Well, I'm gonna give the power over the Maz. Maz, I'm typing a message to you right now. Which one would you rather see? Don't mention which one you wouldn't want to recommend. Because I'm gonna keep
definitely go with Tremors.
Tremors. All right, so
nice. Love Tremors.
So we're gonna be watching
my childhood fear.
Yeah, this is actually a movie that gave me much fear when I was a child as well, but it's become a guilty pleasure movie as I got older. So this is Tremors from 1990. There are actually 5 Tremors movies, if you would believe it or not.
The first 2 are the only ones that matter.
Exactly.
Yep.
This was directed by Ron Underwood. Okay, repairman Val McKee and Earl Bassett are tired of their dull lives in a small desert town of perfection. Okay, this is in Nevada, but just as the 2 try to skip town, they happen upon a series of mysterious deaths and are concerned. And a concerned seismologist studying unnatural readings below the ground. With the help of an eccentric couple, the group fights for survival against giant worm-like monsters hungry for human flesh. And this movie stars Kevin Bacon, Finn Carter, Fred Ward, Ariana Richards, and Michael Gross, to name a few. And like I said, this is a guilty pleasure movie for me to the bone, so it's going to be interesting to see what you guys think of it.
I don't want to know what your other movie was now. I think I have an idea.
Never
but...
get to know.
Well, it's the other guilty pleasure movie that I love too, but I think I'll recommend that one maybe next.
All right. I'm excited to revisit. So it's a good revisit.
Yeah, I was like, I always enjoy Tremors, so.
Well, hey, big thanks to Maz for coming on the show today.
Yes, thank you.
It was wonderful having you on and hearing your just knowledge of the whole story of Goodfellas.
Yeah, it was.
I definitely appreciate you guys having me on mine. You gentlemen, thanks, Freakz.
Freakz.
Thank you, Freakz. We don't really have a name for our fans, but Freakz is a pretty good one, huh?
There you go.
There you go, Film Freakz.
Only took 50 episodes.
Alrighty, well, if you guys want to check out Maz on Twitter, he's at MazTechGaming. Is there an underscore in there?
No
underscore. And if you want to follow him on Twitch and YouTube, it's the same name. Eventually, he's going to get back to streaming, if I remember correctly, right?
As soon as I get good internet here, I'm back.
All right. Well,
I'm on DSL still.
Well, we are all ready and waiting for your grand return. And like I said, if you want to follow him, just go over to Maztech Gaming on any of those websites and give him a follow and wait for the word on when he's going to be coming back. And without further ado, let's go ahead and close out the show. I am YemmytheFerret, and I've been here with...
Pretty Waffles.
Animation.
Maztech Gaming.
And in spirit, Coco Gamer. And we are Film Freaks with a Z. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.